Welcome to Hugging Face Datasets. This lesson is part of Module 03, Data Preparation. Let's get started. Let's now look at Lesson 3.2, Hugging Face Datasets. Here we can see the HF ecosystem. Let's now look at Overview. Here we can see the dataset loading flow. The datasets library from Hugging Face is the industry standard for working with training data. It makes loading, processing, and saving datasets incredibly easy, and it's optimized for large datasets that don't fit in memory. Duration, 30 minutes. Difficulty, beginner. Let's now look at learning objectives. Here we can see the popular datasets chart. By the end of this lesson, you will load datasets from Hugging Face Hub, load local datasets, JSON, JSON-L, CSV, Parquet, explore and inspect dataset structure, filter, sample, and shuffle datasets, create train, validation splits, save processed datasets for training, use dataset streaming for large files. Let's now look at why use Hugging Face datasets. Here we can see the train val test split. Let's now look at benefits. Here we can see the dataset streaming. Memory efficient, only loads data when needed. Fast, optimized caching and processing. Flexible, works with any file format streaming. Handle datasets larger than RAM built-in tools, filtering, mapping, splitting. Compatible, works seamlessly with unsloth and transformers. Let's now look at versus traditional methods. Here we can see the local formats comparison. Traditional way, loads everything into memory. Hugging Face way, memory mapped, lazy loading. Let's now look at installation. Here we can see the filtering sampling methods. You should already have this from Module 2, but let's verify. In Jupyter Notebook Verify installation. Expected output, datasets version 2.17.0 or newer. Let's now look at loading datasets from Hugging Face Hub. Here we can see the dataset split strategies. Let's now look at finding datasets. Here we can see the saving formats guide. Visit huggingface.co.datasets and search for instruction following datasets, chat, conversational datasets, code, programming datasets, medical, legal, etc. Domain-specific data. Let's now look at loading a public dataset. Here we can see the common dataset errors. Load a popular instruction dataset. Here's the bash code for this section, starting with dataset dict. Let's now look at exploring the data. View first example. Output, instruction. Give 3 tips for staying healthy. Input, output. 1, eat a balanced diet. Let's now look at loading specific subsets. Some datasets have multiple configurations. Load specific split. Let's now look at loading local datasets. Let's now look at from JSON-L, most common. Single file, multiple files, train, validation, split from different files, dataset dict, train, dataset, validation, dataset. Let's now look at from JSON, standard JSON file with array. The field parameter specifies which key contains the array. Let's now look at from CSV, with options. Let's now look at from Parquet. Here's the Python code for this section, starting with dataset, tries load dataset, Parquet, data files, large dataset. Let's now look at using Windows paths. Use forward slashes or raw strings, or use raw string, or use path. Let's now look at exploring dataset structure. Let's now look at basic information. What splits exist? Get the training split. How many examples? What columns? Features. Features, instruction, value, detyped as string, output, value, detyped as string, column names. Let's now look at accessing data. Get first example, returns, dict, get multiple examples, iterate through dataset. Let's now look at statistics. Count examples. Check for missing values if you have optional fields. Get unique values for categorical data. Let's now look at filtering and sampling. Let's now look at select specific examples. Select by index, select random indices. Let's now look at filter by condition. Filter examples where instruction is short. Filter examples containing specific keyword. Filter examples with output longer than 200 chars. Performance tip: filtering can be slow on large datasets. Consider using numproc for parallel processing. Here's the Python code for this section, starting with filtered -- dataset train. Filter. Let's now look at sample random examples. Shuffle and take first n, or use train test split to sample percentage. Let's now look at shuffling. Shuffle with seed for reproducibility. Shuffle differently every time shuffle is memory efficient. Doesn't copy data. Why shuffle? Prevents ordering bias in training. Helps model generalize. Standard practice before training. Let's now look at train validation splits. Let's now look at method 1, split after loading. Load full dataset, split into 80% train, 20% validation train, 400, validation, 100 if total was 500. Let's now look at method 2, load pre-split files. If you already have separate files, let's now look at method 3, custom split percentages. 70% train, 15% validation, 15% test. First split, 70% train, 30% temp. Second split, 50-50 of temp years 15% val, 15% test. Let's now look at saving datasets. Let's now look at save as JSONL. Save single split, save with options. Let's now look at save as Parquet, recommended for large datasets. Here's the Python code for this section, starting with dataset train. To Parquet, output train.parquet. Let's now look at save as CSV. Here's the Python code for this section, starting with dataset train. To CSV output train.csv index false. Let's now look at save entire dataset dict. Save all splits later, load it back, or let's now look at dataset streaming for large datasets. Let's now look at when to use streaming. Use streaming when dataset is larger than your RAM. You want to start training immediately. You're exploring a huge dataset. Regular loading loads everything. Streaming loads examples on the fly. Iterate through stream. Let's now look at streaming from local files. Stream large local file. Take first 1,000 examples from stream. Limitations of streaming. Can't use random access. Dataset won't work. Can't shuffle efficiently. Can't get length with len. Solution: use streaming to explore, then download process normally for training. Let's now look at practical examples. Let's now look at example 1. Load, explore, and split a local dataset. 1. Load your JSONL file. 2. Explore first few examples. 3. Create train validation split 80-20. 4. Save splits. Let's now look at example 2. Filter and sample a large dataset. Load large public dataset. Filter only instructions related to programming or code. Sample 500 random examples. Save for training. Let's now look at example 3. Combine multiple datasets. Load 2 separate datasets, combine them, shuffle and split. Let's now look at example 4. Convert dataset format. Load dataset in one format. Transform structure if needed. Convert from Q&A format to instruction format. Save in new format. Let's now look at hands-on exercise. Let's now look at exercise 1. Load and explore a public dataset. Load the Tatsu Lab Alpaca dataset. Your tasks: 1. Print the number of examples. 2. Print the column names. 3. Display the first 5 instructions. 4. Filter examples where input is empty. Click for solution. Load dataset. Task 1. Number of examples. Task 2. Column names. Task 3. First 5 instructions. Task 4. Filter empty input. Task 5. Count empty versus non-empty. Let's now look at exercise 2. Create your own dataset pipeline. Goal: load your recipe dataset from lesson 3.1, filter it, split it, and save it. Load your recipe assistant dataset.js and from lesson 3.1, filter. Keep only examples with output, 50 characters, shuffle with seed 42, split, 80% train, 20% validation. Save both splits. Write your code here. Click for solution. Load dataset. Filter. Output, 50 characters, shuffle split, 80-20, save. Let's now look at common issues and solutions. Let's now look at issue 1, type error. String indices must be integers. Problematic code. Correct code or load with split parameter. Let's now look at issue 2, Windows path errors. Backslashes cause issues. Solution, use forward slashes or raw strings. Option 1, forward slashes. Option 2, raw string. Option 3, use pathlib. Let's now look at issue 3, out of memory when loading large dataset. Loading 10 GB dataset. Solution, use streaming or load in chunks. Option 1, streaming. Option 2, sample first, then create dataset from sample. Let's now look at issue 4, key error when accessing columns. Assuming column exists, check columns, use correct key, or use .get with default. Let's now look at key takeaways. 1. Use load dataset for both local and remote datasets. JSON-L is the best format for most fine-tuning projects. Always split data into train batch validation, 80-20 is common. 4. Shuffle before splitting to avoid order bias. Use streaming for huge datasets that don't fit in memory 6. Check column names before accessing data 7. Use forward slashes in Windows paths. Let's now look at quick reference, key functions. Loading, exploring, processing, saving, combining. Let's now look at knowledge check. Before moving on, ensure you can. 1. Load a local JSON-L file into a dataset. 2. Access and print specific examples. 3. Filter a dataset based on conditions. 4. Create an 80-20 train validation split. 5. Save a processed dataset. 6. Use streaming for large datasets. 7. Handle Windows file paths correctly. Let's now look at assignment. Create a complete data pipeline for your project. 1. Load your custom dataset from lesson 3.1 or create new. 2. Print statistics, total examples, column names. 3. Filter. Remove examples with output, 20 characters. 4. Shuffle the dataset. 5. Split, 80% train, 20% validation. 6. Save both splits as JSON-L7. Verify by reloading and printing counts. Starter template. 1. Load. 2. Statistics. 3. Filter your code here. 4. Shuffle your code here. Let's now look at what's next. You now know how to load and process existing datasets. But what if you need to create your own custom dataset from scratch? That's exactly what we'll cover next. Continue to Lesson 3.3, Creating Custom Datasets. Let's now look at additional resources. Hugging Face Datasets Documentation, Datasets GitHub repository, Browse public datasets, Dataset Streaming Guide, Processing Guide. Completed this lesson? Update your progress tracker. That wraps up Hugging Face Datasets. Well done on completing this lesson. See you in the next one.